Hello there everyone, have you heard of the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV with an expanded free trial which you can play through the entirety of A Realm Reborn and the award-winning Heavensward up to level 60 for free with no restrictions on playtime? Well, now that I've just read that off of my phone, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't seen me before, my name is Joesephyr and welcome to my very first and hopefully not my last video on Final Fantasy XIV. Now, I've been wanting to do FF14 content for quite some time now. You can see through my little notes here, I've had tons of ideas for videos and things I wanted to do on FF14 for the longest time, and now I'm finally kind of taking that leap of faith, having been inspired by FF14 FanFest, the announcements for Endwalker, all sorts of other stuff like that, because I wanted to share my love for this game that I've gained from streaming it for the past year and kind of extend that into my YouTube content, because I want to showcase why Final Fantasy fans in particular should give this game a try. Like, all the content creators I see for this game tend to be MMO players rather than Final Fantasy fans. So I wanted to showcase to all the Final Fantasy fans out there why they should be playing this game, and therefore kind of show you guys my journey with it so that you guys can share some of it for yourself too. Now, before we get started, as always, don't forget to check out my social links in the description box below, including Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and Patreon. Like I said, I already stream FF14 twice a week over on Twitch, as well as Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, and also my Final Fantasy count-up that I do every Friday night. And on Twitter, I have taken to posting a lot of screenshots and G-poses and all that kind of stuff that I'll get to in another video, I'm sure, with regards to FF14, so there's plenty of content there from me to be had for this amazing game. And then with regards to Patreon, I always shout out one of my patrons every time I release one of my videos, and today that person is going to be Zypress, who has been a follower of mine for a very, very long time. So massive thank you goes out to you, and I hope that those of you who have followed me for Dissidia up until now can appreciate some Final Fantasy XIV content as well. Now, to give you a brief history of my time with Final Fantasy XIV, I'd played it for a while before the release of Shadowbringers. So I started maybe end of Heavensward, start of Stormblood, on and off, so between its first and second major expansions, but I was constantly intimidated by the monumental size of the game because I'd never played an MMO before. I'd never played EverQuest, I'd never played World of Warcraft or anything like that, and therefore looking at a game like Final Fantasy XIV or any MMO, I was worried I was constantly going to have to play catch up because there are people who have spent loads of time with the game since 2.0 or Realm Reborn or even 1.0, which was the original Final Fantasy XIV before they'd redone it as a Realm Reborn and it gained the success that it has now. But like I said, whenever I've looked at content creators who play like FF14, they use terminology that I didn't understand, and it's such a different experience to Final Fantasy games than the one I was used to as a Final Fantasy fan, and therefore I worried that I would always be at a disadvantage because I wanted to start playing 14 because it was a Final Fantasy game I hadn't played, rather than another MMO. And like I said, the majority of content creators I see, not all of them, but the majority of them, I see talk about FF14 that they were after having come from other MMOs such as World of Warcraft, whereas I came to it as an FF fan. And like I said, I was a bit intimidated by it at first because it is so big, but then that kind of overwhelming grew and grew and grew, because I'll get to why as we progress through the video, but it grew and grew into a sense of absolute splendor. There's just so much to love in this game, and therefore I can happily tell you, as someone who had never played an MMO before Final Fantasy XIV, I've been playing that game for about 2 years now, and in quarantine over the past year, it has genuinely saved me. It really has. The social equivalent, everything that I've learned from the game, I am still learning so much, and I'm loving it. So I was wrong about the intimidation factor for FF14. So I wanted to talk to you guys all about how it became my first MMO, why it became such a savior, and why, honestly, any of you that have hesitation towards Final Fantasy XIV, particularly as a Final Fantasy fan, just give the game a try. So the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV is its story. Now, the story, first and foremost, is a very much a Final Fantasy title. It just is. There is a magic and a soul that Final Fantasy stories have that a lot of other games just don't have. It encapsulates a wide variety of tones, from being melancholy, there's some really sad moments in Final Fantasy XIV. To those of you who already played it, all I need to mention is the name Horsefont. And existential crises, and then it goes to humor, really massive humor, and then back again with an elegance that just makes it all work. You know, modern Final Fantasy games, like between FF7 Remake, Final Fantasy XV, things like that, 7 Remake, with anything to do with Wall Market, you'll understand that kind of tonal shift that I'm talking about. I think it's amazing how the developers for this game just go between these different shades and emotions and go back again without, it just seems effortless. Everything just feels right. And compared to other MMOs, which like I said, I haven't played others, but I know a lot of people that have, a lot of people that played World of Warcraft, EverQuest, etc., and then played, Final Fantasy XIV afterwards, and they all say the same thing, and that's within other MMOs, particularly World of Warcraft, you don't feel important as a character, as opposed to being a character in the world that is the main character of the game, as it were. You're just a champion within the game, and there's millions of you. Whereas in Final Fantasy XIV, you feel important. The story is very much based around you and the companions that you meet, the characters, and I'll get to the characters in a minute, but like, you feel important. There is motivation there that drives you to want to continue to play the game and find out what happens to you as well as the characters around you. And I think that that's something really magical. And so to those people who have shunned Final Fantasy XIV because they're thinking, oh, it's an MMO, I just don't want to play it, and worry that the transition to that type of genre would leave something lost in translation in terms of that Final Fantasy soul. Don't. Because honestly, the story, the characters, the writing in FF14, particularly Shadowbringers, is honestly some of the best writing I have ever seen in a Final Fantasy game. So now we're going to talk about characters. Characters, the heart and soul of any video game, realistically. And everyone has their favourite characters in a Final Fantasy game. Some love their Cloud, some love their Tifa, some love their Tidus, some love their Yuna, some love their Terra, some love their Kefka, their Sephiroths, name them. There's hundreds of characters in the franchise that people really love. Well, let me tell you, as someone who has played every single Final Fantasy title except for 11, because again, shunned by the MMOs, was something I now regret, 14 now has some of my favourite characters in the entire franchise. And I'm not kidding, and I've played all of the Final Fantasy games. I am currently playing through FF4, and that's the last one that I haven't played through, but I can now say that I've played through all of them. But 14's characters are just phenomenal, like the growth that some of them go through. My favourite characters in the game are Alphinaud and Alisaie, which are characters you meet right at the beginning. You don't really think they're going to become favourites as time progresses, but by the time you get to the end of Shadowbringers, or even way before that, Stormblood, and like, they just grow as characters, and they're wonderful. Loads of people know about Y'shtola, loads of people know about Thancred, the other scions of the Seventh Dawn. They are lovable characters. And quite frankly, it doesn't just have to be the main characters we're talking about. The villains are phenomenal. Like, you know, characters like Emet-Selch you'll have probably heard about, and there are a massive amount of complexity to Emet-Selch. And not only that, but you get your classic comic book style villains in characters like Xenos, who you may have heard of from playing Dissidia NT, or you may have just seen before. There are a lot of characters in that game, like the villains, that are really strong as well, and even the side characters. Earlier I mentioned humour in the game. If you want humour from a Final Fantasy game, just like some of the older games have, and I'm talking like self-referential humour like FF7 when they point out the pointy hand above their head, or stuff like that, then honestly, you might just want to check out Hildebrand and his quests. Now, like I said, this video is to kind of showcase the fact that Final Fantasy fans should not skip out on Final Fantasy XIV if they haven't already. Another thing that they should bear in mind is the fact that it's a fan service playground. Like, there are so many references to older games in the franchise. You might notice in some of the gameplay footage I'm showing here that I'm using a Warrior of Light skin. It's my leveling gear for tank gear, things like that. So I use it because it's fun while I'm leveling. I also have access to Judge Gabrant's outfit. There are outfits from all across the franchise, and that's just outfits and glamours alone. There's boss fights from older classics, like you can see Exdeath, you can see Kefka. There's like tons of references to other characters, and even other franchises like Nier and like Yokai Watch have turned up in this game. And honestly, Nier and the crossovers with that, and you know, I am somebody who loves Nier Automata, which obviously helps, but Some of these crossover style moments have led to some of the most gripping times I have ever had playing a video game, period, let alone in this one. And the music alone for some of these encounters makes the hairs on my arms stand on end. They are that incredible. Soken does an incredible job with music. You hear FF14 fans gush about the music for like days on end, and having been somebody that's now been gripped into Final Fantasy XIV after a long while of waiting to do so, now I can see why. One of the other things that I was very, very surprised at when it came to FF14, honestly, actually I've been surprised by this twice, in fact, is how playable this game is with the controller. Now, I am somebody that gets very overwhelmed by mouse and keyboard setup. I'm not a mouse and keyboard kind of guy. I'm a lefty, which is not great for a lot of keyboard users. I even have a left-handed mouse and I still find it overwhelming. And honestly, you know, I mean, a lot of the footage I'm using here doesn't have the UI on it, but if you've ever looked at the UI for an MMO, it does look overwhelming. There's so many buttons on the screen all at once. You don't think it would ever work on a controller or anything like that. But after researching like the various methods of using a controller, it's become second nature, and I am a console gamer. And I hope that, like, if this video does well, and if other videos I do on FF14 do well, I'd love to kind of help others in the future learn to play with a controller in order to open the game up to even more people, particularly those with a PS5 or PS4, which actually brings me to the second time this game has shocked me when it came to controller use. This game on PS5 plays like an absolute dream. I mean, it plays pretty damn well on the PS4 as well, but I was honestly stunned by just how strong this game felt while playing on a PS5. It uses the DualSense controller well, it feels comfortable, it just feels right, which means that I can be a lazy butt and sit at my sofa watching it, like having it on the TV and just playing it with a controller in my hands, and it just feels right because I could do all the same things I could do with a controller and that I could have done at my desk, and I think it feels fantastic. Now, one thing I will say, I am not a master of this game. Like I said, I've been playing the game for about 2 years now, so since the release of Shadowbringers. And when I say I've been playing for 2 years, I want to say only maybe 18 months of that, a year of that, since I've been streaming a lot, has been spent actively researching the game, wanting to get better, wanting to learn the mechanics, wanting to do everything the game has to offer as opposed to just going through the story. And honestly, even now, and I imagine for a long time to come, not even with Endwalker or any of that withstanding, I am constantly learning new things. And the feeling of, like I said earlier, the feeling of being overwhelmed has just been replaced by a yearning to discover more and you learn more things about it, because it confounds me just how varied the content in this game is. It can be as overwhelming or as casual as you want it to be. Like I said, for the first year, I spent a lot of the time just playing through the story, because the story's that damn good that you can play it not quite like a single player game, because you have dungeons and things that you do need to play with other players with, and I'll get to the community in just a moment as well, but there's just so much to the game that you can just experience at your own pace. So if I have one piece of advice for anyone who wants to learn to play FF14 or just try it out, I'll get to the free trial in a little while. I could be here for a long time gushing about this game. But I think that you just have to take everything at your own pace. That content, all that big content, it's still gonna be there when you're ready. Don't panic about that. And like I said, the content is so varied. There is something for everyone. From people who want to do world's first on raids. I am not one of those people, just gonna say that now. Far too stressful for me. To those who, like I said, just want to experience the story and learn about all the characters. Or people who want to design houses or glamours or collectibles like mounts and minions and treasure hunting and crafting. I'm literally only scratching the surface of crafting, and I'm 2 years in, and it's insane how much there is to discover. And my hope going forward is not only to help create content for players who might look at this and go, oh god, that's all too much for me to handle, but because it's going to give me reasons to learn things, and I want to learn things with you guys, so that I'm coming at this from another angle where it's like, oh, I've learned this really cool new thing, and I want you guys to come and join me in learning this new stuff. And like the way the game is played as well, it teaches you the vast majority of things that you need to know to finish the game and just progress. And by the time you finish that story, it's not a case of, oh, there's loads of stuff you have to do. You will want to do the rest of the stuff the game has to offer. Now, I can't talk about Final Fantasy XIV without talking about its community. Now, I've said it once and I'll say it again, that I have learned from the game itself, but I've learned way more from the community. People who have been helpful, kind, patient, welcoming throughout my time with the game from start to finish. Now, I'm not saying that there's no trolls in this game. There are trolls in every game. There's toxic people on every game. But 99% of every interaction I've had with strangers, with people who follow me for other games, all sorts of other things have been absolutely wonderful. The good eggs out there are plentiful and bountiful. And I've made some really good friends in this game. Something I really struggle to do, and that's ironic, I know. Coming from somebody who's a full-time content creator, I struggle to make friends online. And there's a reason for that. I am somebody that is very social in person. I find it quite hard to make friends through text chat and things like that. But with this game, I've met other streamers, other content creators, people who've reached out to me because they've seen me from other games or seen me from other things. And then I've now got a group of people I play with regularly, multiple in fact. So I just want to say to those streamers, content creators and players in general, massive thank you, because you have given me inspiration to want to make this content and want to spread the word to other players. Now, there are tons of other things that I could sit here and talk to you about in Final Fantasy XIV, like the fact that, you know, there's no multiple characters per class in the game. You get all of the jobs, whether it be crafters, ranged, healer, tank, all of the classics that you know from Final Fantasy, including some extras like Blue Mage and stuff, all on one character. You only ever have to make one character. I could gush about how amazing the trials themselves are. Like, some of my favourite moments in the game have been when I've come across a boss that I wasn't expecting to see. There's one in particular that absolutely shines bright, but it's spoilerish to tell you guys, so I'm not going to. But honestly, there's no reason why you guys can't experience this for yourselves right now. I made a joke because there's a meme that goes around about people spreading the word about the free trial for FF14, but it's a real thing. Like, you know, you can download the game right now. You don't have to pay no subscription costs. You don't even have to pay for the game. You don't have to pay for anything, and you can experience pretty much half the game now if you want to. So we're talking all of A Realm Reborn and all of Heavensward. So up to level 60, which is quite a way into the game. Like, the current level cap is 80, will soon be 90. But you get a massive amount of story, huge amount of dungeons. You can earn a decent amount of gil, not loads, but a decent amount, and you can experience a lot of what people are talking about, including myself, for yourself right now just by downloading the free trial. And when I say you get half the game of an MMO for free, you're talking hundreds of hours of entertainment without having to spend anything. Now, I know I sound like an advert for this game right now, but I'm not kidding. I love this game. I love this game so much that I want to spread into doing more regular content for it. And therefore, I want you guys to download the trial because it gives me more people to play with. So call me selfish, but that is where I'm coming from. So that's going to be all from today's video on Final Fantasy XIV, and just as a quick note, if you want an idea of how varied and wide variety the content is in this game, all of the footage that I've had playing in this video the entire time, I filmed in one day, one play session, and you saw all the stuff you saw. It's all different, it's all wide, there's so much going on in this game, it's amazing, and I cannot recommend it enough. As a Final Fantasy fan, you owe it to yourself to at least try the game out. There's plenty of it that you can play for free, and you can decide for yourself by the time you get to the end of it if it's not going to be for you. It is a bit different to FF4, to other FF games. It is a little bit overwhelming to begin with, but that's why I want to make more content going forward in this game, so that I can help people to feel that it's a bit more broken down, that bridge isn't so wide, in the same way as I've done for other games in the past as well. And I really hope that I can do the same thing for this one, because I really love it, and I really hope that you guys do too. Let me know in the comments below if there's any aspect of FF14 or MMOs in general, anything like that, that perhaps somebody who's played FF14 as their first MMO could answer. That, you know, if there's any kind of content that you think, oh, I'd like to know a bit more about that before I commit to anything, let me know in the comments below if there's other videos you'd like me to make on the subject. project. So that's going to be it from me. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications on any other videos I might be making, including much more FF14 coverage coming forward. And that's going to be it from me. So thank you all ever so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys soon. Take care.